Summer 2022. Everything's a little fuzzy. I'm in the backyard of somebody's house that I know. A group of people have gathered there. We're talking out on the back porch. Then we're in somebody else's car out back. It's not my car, not Grace. Some sort of four-door sedan. It kind of reminds me of the old Ford LTD my family had when I was a kid. A battleship. I'm in the back seat. Some of the other people here are in the car with me. But then they get out and head toward the house. They leave me in the back seat. I hear a noise. The car starts to slip backwards down a hill. It slips further and further back until I hear a splash. The car is slid into a large pond or a small lake behind the house. The car starts to sink underneath the surface of the water. Dark water starts to flood the car. I'm staring at the door and the window. Can I get the door open against the pressure of the water on the other side? If I roll down the window, can I get through the water that will gush inside and try to push me back in the car? Am I going to drown? As I ponder whether I'm about to drown to death, I wake up. I take a deep breath of air. Sweet air. The breath of life. Just a dream. Still, it had a vivid premonition feel to it. Was this a premonition? A prophecy? Am I gonna die soon? I really didn't know if it was premonition or just a weird dream. But it did get me thinking. What if I did die soon? What if I die on this trip? What do I want to leave behind for friends and family? What do I want to be rid of so that my friends and family would not have to suffer the burden of sorting through it? Whether the dream was prophecy or premonition or just some subconscious fear bubbling to the surface, one thing became clear. It sparked a decision. Before I left for this trip, I decided to clean house. I had plenty of cleaning house to do. By the time I moved to North Carolina from the Boston area in 2018, I had slimmed down my physical belongings to about 2 carloads of stuff. When I crash landed at my parents' house, I pretty much just threw everything down in the upstairs bedroom. I didn't plan on being there very long, so I never really organized it. 4 years later, that same disorganized mess still stared me in the face. The time had come to take care of that mess. I went through everything to figure out what I would keep, what I would give to Goodwill, and what I would put in the trash. I wanted to slim down the keep pile small enough so that the things I actually used could come with me in 1 carload. I needed a small carload too because I wanted to be able to sleep in the car. Car camping. I had slept in Grace before on a visit to Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Back then, I just folded the back seat down and used a sleeping bag, pillow, and blanket. Surprisingly comfortable. But that was just for one night. I planned on doing more car camping on this trip, so I upgraded the bedding. I made a camping bed that I put in the back of Grace. I used a small wooden frame like a box spring, 2 pieces. It helped flatten out the back and support a 3-inch camping mattress on top of that. Quite comfortable. Practically luxurious. It took a lot of work to go through my stuff and get the keep pile small enough to fit in the car with enough room left over to sleep. A lot of old clothes went to Goodwill. Some clothes and a lot of random stuff just went to the trash. An awful lot of the old clothes and stuff had memories attached. Many were painful memories that brought back difficult feelings. Sadness, anger, fear. My old, reliable, go-to wool winter coat. A dressy coat that could go with a suit. I didn't need it in North Carolina, and I didn't need it anywhere I was going out west. But when I held the coat and looked at it, I remembered all the times I'd worn it in Boston, at my old job that fired me, on dates with my crazy ex-girlfriend, at bars. So many bars. Seeing the coat, feeling the coat in my hands, a wave of sadness, guilt, shame, and a sense of loss seemed to hammer me like the freezing cold winds of winter in Boston. But then I put it in the Goodwill pile, and it felt good to let that coat and the memories go. The past is gone. Sometimes painful, but it's over. Learn from it, but don't dwell in it. No need to cling to it anymore. Just let it go. With each pile that went to Goodwill or out to the trash, my heart and soul lifted, lighter and lighter, with each possession, memory, and feeling I let go. I remembered an old saying that I think came from an adaptation of dialogue from a Toni Morrison novel. If you want to fly, you gotta give up the things that weigh you down. After a while, the keep pile for stuff I actually used and wanted to take with me became manageable. It looked like it could fit in one carload. A lot of stuff went to Goodwill. A lot of stuff just went to the trash. But another pile emerged. A keep pile, but leave behind, with my parents. It wasn't useful stuff. Nothing I actually needed. It had little or no financial value. But it had sentimental value. Old photographs, old yearbooks, old keepsakes from school and childhood, some family history and genealogy stuff, some meaningful books. I didn't need this stuff. It was heavy. It would take up too much space in the car. No sense dragging it along on this trip. But I didn't feel right about throwing it in the trash. I decided this stuff was worth leaving behind. If I died, my family and friends could go through the photos and mementos and decide what to do with them. Hopefully they'd enjoy the trip down memory lane. They could decide what they wanted to keep, and what no one wanted to keep could just go to the trash. I would let it go, but let it pass down to my loved ones whenever that time came. When I told one of my friends about the old photos, he had a helpful suggestion. Label the pictures, he said. Just basics, names, places, dates. He'd inherited some old photos from a loved one who'd passed away, and he had a hell of a time trying to figure out who and what was in those photos. Some of the people he may not have known. But even when he probably knew some of the people in the photos, he didn't recognize them because they were much younger then. Without labels for basic context, the precious memories just became a gobbledygook mess of nameless faces and places. Based on that, I decided to take the time to go through my photo albums and photos and do some basic labeling. Put some names, places, dates on the inside of albums like a table of contents, write on the back of loose photos, put labels on the photos and albums, jot like a couple of stories down here and there on sticky notes to put in the albums, just enough so that the photos could tell their story for anyone left behind who wanted to go through them. I talked to some other friends about this process of letting these things go. I mentioned the dream about being trapped in the car sinking in a lake. One of my friends said she thought the dream was very important, but not about my physical death. The detail that it was someone else's car struck her as especially important. She thought it spoke of the process I was living, where I've been living my life according to other people's ideas and desires, and now I'm putting an end to that to find out what I truly want to do with my life. She also thought there might be an aspect that I thought I needed to do this for my own spiritual survival. I'd never thought of that, but when she said it, it really resonated. Bingo! As I was going through this stuff to leave behind, labeling photos and albums, I went through a lot of old memories. Some joyous, some weighed down with sadness now. I had some photos from my childhood with me and my family, and I felt grateful for growing up in such a loving family. I had a lot of photo albums from past trips over the last 30 years. Trips overseas and all across the country. These photos filled me with gratitude for the amazing experiences of my travels. From the incredible beauty of nature the simple pleasures of spending time with friends on the road or even back home. And in almost every place I ever lived, my brother came to visit me. Chicago, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Houston, Texas, Boston, Vermont, you name it. Everywhere, my brother came for a visit. Not to mention some of my other friends, too. High school friends, college friends, friendships spanning 25 or 30 years or even more. There were pictures from celebrations of major life milestones. And an unforgettable trip to Paris and Amsterdam with some of my college friends. I'm still hoping that one day we might do a reunion trip. some of the photos, I saw old friends that I'd lost touch with. And I felt the joy and gratitude from the experience of those old friendships. But I also felt some sadness and loss. The alcohol abuse certainly didn't help those friendships. But some of the loss was just the natural ebb and flow of time as people moved away and grew, or not, in different directions. I saw my old sailboat, the Australia. Some great memories there, sailing around with family and friends on Lake Pontchartrain. And from 20 years ago, I ran across photos from a previous westward trip out to Colorado. My God, what an absolutely gorgeous place. I'd lost touch with everyone from that trip except my friend Michael, who had served as one of the groomsmen at my wedding, and I still kept in touch with. I don't know where any of the rest of them are now, but I hope they're doing well, living life with all its joys and all its sorrows the best they can, one day at a time. What a tremendous gift to have such great travel experiences and to have such loving friends and family across so much space and time. I do have such amazing friends and family. Some of the photos and keepsakes were a virtual festival of love and gratitude, but certainly not all of them. Some had some real pain running through them. A broken leg, my divorce, lots of pictures with my ex-wife in them back when we were dating, engaged, and married. But I saw how even some of those dark, tough times led me to the light of friends and family, to reconnect and deepen relationships after years of neglect. As long as we have the breath of life in us, it's not too late. and I saw how some of those difficult periods in my life led me to deepen newer friendships too, and make new memories there. As I let go of the past more and more, it opens up room for new growth in my life. New friendships, new experiences, newer, healthier habits, and I build my successes and joys on the foundation of my failures, my losses, and my sadness. Eventually, I ran across some old love letters. In particular, one from my ex-wife and one from my ex-girlfriend. A flood of emotions came up with those. I remembered the love and joy that was there once, but it was gone now, leaving a vast cavern of emptiness, loss, sadness. What should I do with those? I waffled between burning them and keeping them for whatever descendant might be interested in them as some sort of historical record. After a while, I decided to do something simple. Just ask for help, ask for advice, basic recovery. Ask for help, accept help. The unanimous answer? Let them go. Without appropriate context, they would just be a source of confusion and pain for any loved ones left behind after I died. I tore them up and got ready to burn them. Then I couldn't find a lighter or match for the life of me. I looked everywhere in the house. I probably found 20 pairs of scissors, 15 rolls of clear tape, and dozens of boxes of envelopes. But no lighter, no matches. I laughed, gave up, and threw the little torn-up pieces of paper in the trash. Unceremonious, but effective. And then I ran across the box. The box. The big box that had my old wedding album, my old wedding ring, pictures from the honeymoon. Whew. Why did I ever keep that box? A huge, swampy mess of grief and regret. Oh yeah, I remembered. Now I remembered why I kept that box in the first place. Shortly after my divorce in 2014, I wondered what to do with that box. Do I burn it? Keep it? Why would I keep it? Something felt wrong about burning it, though. Partially because I'm a bit of a pack rat, especially when it comes to pictures. Partially, I didn't have any rational explanation. Just didn't feel right. I talked to my friend Monica about it. Her parents had divorced when she was younger. She told me, "Don't you dare throw all that stuff away. Right now, you are thinking that that marriage failed. It's all one giant black hole of pure pain and suffering. But your daughters will never think of it that way. I don't think of my parents' marriage that way. That's the marriage that they came from. Yeah, they'll know that marriage didn't last forever, that it ended in divorce, but they will never think of it as all bad. It's where they came from. Without that marriage, they would not even exist. So, you keep all that stuff until they are old enough to appreciate it. And when they're old enough to appreciate it, you give it to them. They can decide then what they want to keep and what they want to throw away. But if you throw it away now, they'll never have that chance. My parents threw out a lot of stuff that I would have loved to have later. Give your daughters the chance that I didn't get." I found that compelling. 8 years later, and I still had the box with all the wedding stuff in it. But my other friend had a good point too. Without any labels, a lot of it might just be meaningless nonsense. Should I go through the wedding stuff and label it? Could I? I decided the answer was yes. I should, and I could. And you know what I found when I went through all those wedding pictures and honeymoon pictures and keepsakes and labeled them? I found that 8 years later, that failed marriage didn't look quite like a giant black hole of pure pain and suffering anymore. Don't get me wrong, there was some real darkness there. Tragic dysfunction that led to deep hurt, intense pain, and brutal emotional suffering. But after 8 years had passed, including 4 years in recovery, I could see more than just the black. Against the backdrop of darkness, I could see the light and love embedded in everything about that wedding, like stars in the night sky. I could see the love between me and my ex-wife that gave birth to the marriage, and eventually gave birth to my daughters, my beautiful daughters. And I could see the love of so many family and friends there too. A lot of my closest family and some of my best friends all flew way out to Vermont to be with me and us that day. Her family and friends too. And we all had a great time. We had the ceremony at the Old Round Church in Richmond, Vermont, a beautiful historic building I've since visited with my daughters. We had the reception at a country club not too far from there. And we had a big party at her parents' house after that reception ended. Everyone had a blast. A huge celebration of love for me and the bride, as well as all the love between family and friends. And these wedding photos bore witness to all of that love. And although that marriage may not have stood the test of time, the love of friends and family certainly did. And as I looked through the photos of my family and friends gathered at the wedding, I had to smile. I had to laugh. I was still in touch with all of them, every single one. And I would see all or almost all of them on my way out west. With the exception of my former brother-in-law, every single groomsman was still a good friend, and every single one I planned to stop and visit on my trip. A love like that can light the night sky. And with that, I had come around to that hill of serenity I call acceptance. Past the river of denial, the rocky shoals of bargaining, the thick brambles of anger, and the valley of sadness. This was the place where my friend Monica had said my daughters would stand when they looked at my previous marriage. Seeing some good, some bad, some in between. Some wonderful things were there, and some wonderful things emerged. My daughters came out of that marriage. How could I really view the marriage that produced my daughters as all bad, as one giant failure? It only took me 8 years and an awful lot of healing and 12-step meetings to get to that hilltop. I would have to thank my friend Monica for her advice. I have been blessed with such great friends, full of wisdom and kindness. In the book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, Dale Carnegie wrote about a story where two men were in prison looking out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other looked up and saw stars. The CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy that I'd learned in recovery, had taught me that all humans suffer from distorted thinking. I can't believe everything I think. A lot of my thoughts are outright lies or at least distortions of the truth. And I'm not alone in this. Cognitive bias, well known in science, is one example of distorted thinking. Another type of distorted thinking is black or white, all or nothing thinking. Our lives weave together with incredible complexity. Rarely is anything in our lives all good or all bad. The mud is there, but so are the stars. Which do I want to focus on? In the immediate aftermath of the divorce and before recovery, I looked down and focused on the mud. 8 years after the divorce, with the benefit of 4 years of recovery, I had learned to look up, to see the stars, and focus more on that. I didn't have to deny the mud, but I didn't have to focus on it either. A simple lesson. Not an easy lesson, but a simple one. Progress. Sweet progress. Not perfection, but progress. My daughters, my greatest contribution to the world, my best co-creation, is all right there in the form of my beautiful daughters. In the Big Book of AA, there is a passage in the discussion of the ninth step that has come to be known as the promises. These are the promises of a better life that awaits us through sobriety and recovery. One of those promises is that we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. That promise has always been a tricky one for me. I've made many, many mistakes in life. Those mistakes have led to a lot of pain and suffering for me and my loved ones, including my daughters. One of my recovery friends helped me reconcile that promise to my reality by saying, in recovery, we learn to accept the past with serenity, and we learn to let go of regret. But it is okay for us to have healthy remorse. If that's the case, then I have plenty of healthy remorse. I've lost a lot from my mistakes. I've lost a lot in my divorce. For me, the greatest loss of all was just that I lost so much time with my daughters. I used to live in the same house with them. I used to work a lot of late nights and travel a fair bit for work. But whenever I was home, I would see them at least once a day, even if it was just early in the morning or late at night when they were still sleeping. I would sneak in their room and give them a kiss on the forehead. The divorce changed that forever. There is not a day that goes by that I do not grieve that loss. But for each loss, that higher power in the universe has a bizarre way of opening the door to something brighter. Without the divorce and all the other many mistakes in my life, I would not have gone into recovery. And recovery has helped me become a better person and offers the hope that I can become a better father, despite any limitations of time and distance. And now that my time with my daughters has become more scarce, so too has it become more precious. And I treasure every moment with them so much more than any silver or gold or house or car or anything material on this earth. They are my greatest gift to the universe, and they are also the universe's greatest gift to me. I may struggle with the line between regret and healthy remorse for some of the things in my life. Never with my daughters. I will never regret having my daughters. One of my greatest privileges in life is just to be their father, however imperfect of a father I may be. Gratitude, the foundation of happiness. Gratitude, the foundation of all virtues. Thank you. So much pain and sadness, but so much love, so many life lessons, and so much wisdom to be grateful for. And another difficult life lesson awaited me before I left on my trip. At the end of July and the beginning of August, I house sat and dog sat for my brother again. My nephew went off to summer camp, and my brother and sister-in-law went to celebrate their anniversary. On the evening of Sunday, July 31st, I took the dogs out for a nice walk before dinner. It was warm that day, but not extra hot like it can get that time of year in the Carolinas. It had rained earlier in the day, and that seemed to cool things off just a touch. We went on one of our longer walks. Not the longest we'd ever done. Our usual longer walk we'd done many times before. Nothing seemed unusual about it at first, but as we got towards the end, on the last stretch towards home, I noticed Penny huffing and puffing more than usual. We were so close to home, I decided the best approach was just get home where she could get some water and rest in the cool, air-conditioned house. But as we started to turn that last corner, I noticed Penny start to swerve and bump into me. Then, right after the last corner, with the house in sight, she just laid down. I gave her a couple of minutes to catch her breath and cool down. Then I tested her to see if she could get up and finish the walk home. She wouldn't budge. I knew she'd overheated. She needed to rest and cool down. Best done in the house. So close to the house, I decided I'd just pick Penny up and carry her the rest of the way home. She was about 65 pounds of dead weight. Not easy to lift and carry, but lift and carry I did. I carried her the rest of the way home and laid her on the cool kitchen tile near the air conditioner vent. I misted cool water on her with a spray bottle to help her cool down. I sat in a nearby chair and let out a sigh of relief. She'll be okay now. Everything will be fine. Then she made a little motion that caught my eye, a twitch and a shudder, and she just stopped breathing. I knelt beside her and tried to get her to breathe again, but she was gone. For a minute, I just knelt at her side in shock. Then I got up and called an emergency vet, but they were closed. I finally got a vet hotline and talked to someone on the line about what had happened. They confirmed what I feared. Penny had died of a heat stroke. When she stopped breathing, that was it. Nothing could be done. I picked Penny up and laid her down on a blanket in the living room. I sat for a while. Then I paced around for a while, just in total shock. Eventually, I wrapped her in that blanket and laid her in a tarp in my brother's backyard next to his pet cemetery. I held a small ceremony with my brother's other dog, Carly. We played some funeral bagpipe music, sang Amazing Grace, prayed for her safe passage, and expressed gratitude for such a good dog. I said I was sorry and asked for forgiveness. I know that if I had not taken her on that walk, or if I'd taken her on a shorter walk, then she would still be alive. Still in shock, lots of guilt, sadness in bursts. There was just a huge void where she used to be. She was not underfoot anymore. She didn't try to lay on me or lick me while I did my nightly yoga. The next morning, she was not waiting in the hallway for me to open the bedroom door like she usually did. She was just gone. Penny was a full-breed American Staffordshire Terrier, built like a pit bull. She looked intimidating, but most of the time she was just a huge ball of sweet, furry love. She had a shorter muzzle, not a super short muzzle like a pug, but shorter muzzle than a retriever. She was more prone to overheating than her adopted sister Carly, who was a mixed breed with Beagle, Collie, German Shepherd, and some other stuff. Penny was a rescue dog from Saving Grace in Raleigh. We think she'd been overbred and abused or neglected by her prior owners. She had some health issues on and off. At one point, she had heartworms, but she seemed to bounce back from that. She had a fair bit of digestion problems. There's really no telling how much damage the earlier abuse and neglect did to her body or how that played into it. At Saving Grace, she was the shelter dog that no one wanted. Full of heartworms, limping along with an arthritic shoulder, looked like a vicious fight dog long past its prime. I think the shelter practically begged my brother's family to foster her. It was during the COVID pandemic. The shelter was desperate to get dogs into a home. My brother and his family took her in as a foster dog, temporary, but my nephew fell in love with her. She was infinitely lovable. And then my brother and sister fell in love with her too. She absolutely loved life at my brother's house with him and his family. Just a big hulk of love and gratitude. After years of abuse, neglect, and whatever darkness she suffered through, she had a couple of years of light, love, kindness, joy, and gratitude. She treasured every minute of it. I remember when she was being treated for heartworms, maybe a couple of years ago, she was on restricted activity levels. After the vet cleared her for activity, we worked to gradually build her strength back up and get her in better shape. She loved walking with me and Carly. She was the slowest of the three of us, but gleefully did her best. She also had an arthritic shoulder, maybe from past trauma or maybe just arthritis. That slowed her down. I remember when we got her back in better shape, taking her up some hills that were challenging for her at the time. I walked alongside her, gave her little lifts sometimes, and often gave her some verbal encouragement. She was like a little canine Rocky, and I was the old Meredith Burgess coach character. She got to where the hills were no big deal, and I was super proud of her. I'd hoped that helped make her stronger so she could live a longer, happier life. She deserved it. Man, I miss that dog. Bon voyage, Penny. See you on the other side. Get a place ready for me. We'll take a nice long walk when I get there. You'll never get tired, and you won't need a leash. Say hello to my other pets there, too. I'm sure they're there to welcome you home. I had a tough conversation waiting for me with my brother the next day. I didn't tell him the night it happened because he was on his anniversary trip. I thought he might be angry. He might have been at some point, but he didn't throw any anger at me. When I called, my brother gave me nothing but love, compassion, and grace. Maybe it's just hard to be mad at someone who is despondent and sobbing over the phone. Maybe I've been blessed with a wonderful brother. Maybe both. When I got back home to my parents' house, I had some good, healthy tears with my parents about Penny. Told some good stories, shared some good memories about Penny and some of our other previous pets. One of my good recovery friends said something that really helped me accept the loss and my role in it. He said, "We make so many little decisions every day that bring us or our loved ones within arm's reach of death. And most of the time we don't appreciate that. We don't appreciate how fragile life is and how much each day of life is a precious gift." On a similar note, my brother said they never really knew how much time they'd get with Penny. They'd noticed she had more difficulty going up and down the stairs recently. Earlier health problems, possible mistreatment by previous owners, plus they weren't even really sure how old she was when they got her. My brother looked at every day they had with her as a bonus, a gift. Maybe I could too. In the end, Penny passed away fairly quickly in the home she loved so much, doing the walk she loved so much, with someone who loved her nearby, trying his best to help her. May I be so lucky when my time comes. A few other things happened before I left for my trip. I went to a family reunion with my parents in Richmond, Virginia. I caught COVID. Fortunately, a relatively mild case for me, and my parents didn't come down with it. They'd just gotten a bivalent booster shot better suited to protect people from the Omicron variant. Perfect timing. As October rolled around, I recovered from COVID and prepared for the trip out west to begin. And I'll talk about the start of the trip next time.